Last episode on the History of Pittsburgh podcast, we learned about the first humans who crossed into the continents of North and South America. Can you imagine? Prior to 23,000 or about 25,000 years ago, no humans had settled in either of these massive globe-spanning continents. Humans had already left Africa for thousands of years and spread into and around Europe, Asia, and Australia. Not until cracks in the massive northern glaciers appeared did humans begin to pour into the Americas. This happened in one of three primary ways. First, humans left East Asia by boat and traveled around the continental ice shelves and deep into modern Canada to avoid the glaciers. Second, humans also may have passed through ice-free corridors over Beringia and into the Americas. Or third, and we know this happened with some degree of certainty, the ice melted, a land corridor called Beringia formed, and humans passed over the land into northern Canada. Just as quickly, though, the land of Beringia was back underwater. Thus, we know humans primarily crossed into the Americas around 23,000 to 25,000 years ago, and this migration ceased when Beringia was buried underwater by the rising tides. Now, we turn our focus back to the Pittsburgh area and one of the earliest human archaeological sites in North America, the Meadowcroft rock shelter. This archaeological site is right in the backyard of modern-day Pittsburgh. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is the History of Pittsburgh podcast. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. These are free ways to support this channel. This podcast is something of a passion of mine. It's something that I've thought about doing for a really long time, and I really enjoy it, but it's hard for me to make the time. So the more support that you can show me, the more time and energy I can dedicate to this. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And if you've watched any of my other YouTube channels, you know I typically do a same time sip. So everybody raise your cup or your glass in the air, have a drink with me, sip with me. It tastes better when we sip together before we dig into the rest of the podcast. Now, the Meadowcroft rock shelter is exactly what it sounds like. A shelter on the side of a cliff formed by the rock cliff itself. These formations are naturally occurring burrows. These burrows, curved into the side of a rock cliff, can protect humans or animals or whoever hides beneath these cliffs from rain, sleet, snow, and the harsh realities of weather outside. These shelters are found all throughout the world. How couldn't they be? They're naturally occurring and have been used by humans, according to some evidence, for at least the last 150,000 years. Now, rock shelters are different from caves. They are generally not as deep into the rock as a cave, nor do they provide as much shelter as a cave. Caves and rock shelters, however, are nature's own ready-made houses, without the air conditioning, of course, and yes, I would personally be dead without air conditioning. But these shelters are perfect places for humans to live, dwell, catch a break from grueling weather conditions. Anyhow, the Meadowcroft rock shelter is located near the small town of modern-day Avella in Washington County, Pennsylvania. It is about a 45-minute drive westward from Pittsburgh, PA, and if you look at Pennsylvania on a map, you'll see it just tucked right into the lower left-hand corner. Nowadays, with various government designations, including being recognized as a National Historic Landmark, this dwelling area where ancient humans sat, slept, and cooked is remarkably well preserved. Additionally, a structure is built up around the archaeological site for visitor viewing and protection from the elements. And did I mention, this is one of, if not the earliest rock shelter and one of the earliest human settlements found in North America. I visited this rock shelter myself in 2018 and had a very pleasant experience. I got to hear a speech by the shelter's original lead archaeologist, James Adavajo, and was given a tour of the rock shelter by Mr. Adavajo himself. Mr. Adavajo is a prominent American archaeologist, and he has defended the shelter for decades, arguing that there are signs of human habitation in this shelter that go back at least 16,000 years and perhaps as far back as 19,000 years. Remember, when I said the archaeological community only recently accepted that humans peopled the Americas as far back as 20,000 years. This was mentioned in my last episode. James Adavajo was one of the early defenders of such an early entry into the Americas because of his experiences at the Meadowcroft rock shelter. And his persistence has pointed to him being ahead of his time and on the right side of history, as multiple other discoveries in the Americas have shown human habitation, again, as far back as 20,000, even 25,000 years ago, and maybe even further back. Back to the meaning of the Meadowcroft rock shelter. Humans, for hundreds of thousands of years, used rock shelters like Meadowcroft. The archaeological record shows people did not generally live in rock shelters like Meadowcroft permanently. Instead, groups of people would cycle seasonally in and out of rock shelters. Different groups would use them for days, weeks, or even months at a time. They were used to shelter from the elements and regain strength. In these shelters, humans would start fires, cook food, butcher animals, weave baskets, sleep, and do all the fun things that ancient humans did. As stated previously, Meadowcroft shows activities like fires, cooking, butchering, dating back as far as 19,000 years ago. The most fascinating part of the shelter to me was one activity in particular, the fire pit. Archaeologists, through very delicate and precise work, are able to reveal how fire pits are used over and over again for hundreds, if not thousands of years. These fire pits form layer upon layer in the sediment and are often key in discovering how a site was used. So each year's fire pit, layered on top of the last, are reservoirs of deep physical evidence. Year by year, archaeologists can identify the fire pit usage. Well, almost year by year, but decade by decade. Meadowcroft's fire pit could be seen layer by layer, year after year. The contents of the ashes in these fire pits can be tested in order to learn the foods eaten and the items burned inside such pits. Very, very fascinating stuff. Anyways, the usage of the rock shelter, as far back as 20 years, tells us the area in and around Pittsburgh, but perhaps even Pittsburgh itself, has been occupied by humans for such a length of time. 20,000 years ago, 16,000 years ago at least. Very cool to put a number on it and in this particular location. These people were the first Pittsburghers or Yinzers. Yins guys want to head down to the rock shelter? It also indicates, if you look at the longest extent of the Wisconsin ice sheet, that the glaciers had just recently receded from this area and that humans swept in. That means humans moving from west coast of America or perhaps from southern America were already established on the continent by the time they reached the rock shelter. Thus, humans had been in North America for at least a few hundred, if not perhaps thousands of years, even before Meadowcroft was occupied. And Meadowcroft itself shows archaeological evidence dating back to 19,000 years. So this allows us to draw the conclusion that people were in the Americas even before that, as they came into Meadowcroft right as the glaciers receded. Studies of the fire pit and items within the shelter give us a more detailed look of what life was like around Meadowcroft. As stated before, the people who stayed here were nomadic. They stayed for weeks or months and then moved on, likely depending on the weather, but also depending on the use of resources. Inside the rock shelter, millions of artifacts have been unearthed since its discovery in 1975. The archaeological team has found ancient spears and arrow points. These were used for hunting and as weapons. Also, many pieces of pottery, basketry, and woven mats were found inside. In regards to food, animal bones for elk, deer, turkey, and ruffed grouse were all detected. The ruffed grouse being Pennsylvania's state game bird, in case you were wondering. Fun to know it was around tens of thousands of years ago as well, being hunted then as it is now. Have you tried any ruffed grouse lately? But all of those animals named are still present in present day Pennsylvania. Although you're not going to find any elk in the Pittsburgh area, there are parts of northern Pennsylvania where you will find them. Additionally, bird bones were found. They are presumed to have been consumed, along with many local fruits and nuts, including acorns, hickory nuts, and walnuts. Overall, a diverse diet of meats and vegetables was present at the rock shelter. All of this paints a broad picture of life at the rock shelter. Groups of people moving in and out for weeks at a time. These groups would hunt and gather in the local area. A stream runs below the rock shelter called Cross Creek, a tributary of the Ohio River. This stream provided fresh water for the inhabitants and also a source of fish. People would stay there for a time, forage, hunt the local area, probably until much of the resources were used up, and then they would move along. And then weeks or months later, the next group would move in and repeat the cycle. This process repeated at the rock shelter for thousands of years, with each subsequent group starting a fire in the same fire pit. New group, same fire. Very, very interesting. It's almost a form of communal living, but in a disconnected and transient way. That's kind of how I saw it. These people likely genetically connected, at least to some degree, to the more recent Native Americans in the Western PA region. These people are, in my view, the first Yinzers, the first Pittsburghers, the first early inhabitants of Western Pennsylvania. It is fascinating to think that one of the oldest archaeological sites in the Americas is right outside of Pittsburgh. This is indicative of the fact that the glaciers had recently receded and humans moved in. An interesting and just provocative picture in my mind. This area, Western Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, has been continuously inhabited for 20,000 years. And then, even as now, it was resource rich for the local human populations. I don't think a lot of people, when they think about their history and the history of Pittsburgh, let their minds wander back this far. But I'm telling you, you can. As soon as the glaciers moved out of this area, there have been people there. This is a very long and rich history, 20,000 years. In the next episode, we will learn who occupied these parts after these earliest inhabitants. What were these people's cultures and practices, and how each last civilization impacted the next. My goal on this podcast is to create an unbroken chain of the history of Pittsburgh. So join me for the next episode as we learn about early Native Americans, the Clovis culture, and the people who inhabited Western Pennsylvania in ancient times. Also, if you like my podcast, you enjoy history, you want to support me, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Free way to support this show, completely free, and it helps tremendously. Thank you very much.